Hey guys, sorry for being a bit late. Um, Sometimes it takes a while for the stream connections to fall in place. I really apologize for that. Just give me a moment. Let me check if we're live or not. Hi, I'm doing all right. It's been a frustrating 10 minutes to start this class, but now that we're live, now that everything is in place, I am happy. Um, right. So yes, today's class is, as we can see, a practice session on fact, inference, and judgment questions. As always, before we begin with the drill, allow me to quickly cover my introduction and the introduction for the Unacademy platform. I'm Prankur Arora. I'm an author, a trainer, a coach, and I'll be essentially presiding over your verbal ability and reading comprehension requirements for any and every management exam. Uh, this class is being conducted on the CAT4MBA YouTube channel, but similarly, we conduct classes on the Unacademy platform as well, wherein we've quite a lot of features that add to the pedagogy, that add to the user experience. We regularly conduct tests and quizzes. There's real time enablement of interaction between the learners and educators in the form of a dedicated chat. You can engage in question discussions, ask your questions. Question answers there are conducted in the form of live polls, which is another adrenaline rush altogether because it gamifies the entire experience. And we have structured courses on the platform, and with one subscription, you will get unlimited access to it all. These are the various subscription models. You can clearly see as the time period goes up, the cost of the subscription per month goes down dramatically. And if you use my name Prankur, you will get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you go for. Said that, let's start with the first question. Okay. I'll do that, Sejal. Thank you for asking. Thank you for putting that forth as a question. Shruti says B. All right. So first of all, what happens is that when we study fact, inference, and judgment, the idea is that uh, for facts, we talk about something that is verifiable, something that has evidence. They are universal truths sometimes, and if we are quoting somebody else's opinion, if we're directly quoting somebody else's opinion, that is also a fact. So any assertion which has statistical data, which has figures without an opinion attached to it, if it is somebody else's opinion which we are stating for a fact, and if it is something that is universal or verifiable, then it is basically classified as a fact. When it comes to inferences, uh, let me draw that for you. When it comes to inferences, it has two components, component A and component B, right? For discussion's sake, I'm classifying it into dissecting it into two components, A and B. Now, A is the known component. A is what we call the known component, and B is what we call the unknown component. Okay. Now, when we are discussing inferences, the idea is that the known component helps us conclude about the unknown component. All right, known component is what we call a fact. So, within inferences, we have a small clause which is essentially a fact, right? That is the first thing an inference should consist of, which is a fact, right? And we are using this fact to conclude about an unknown component, right? We are drawing an inference there, right? If we are using a known component or a fact to conclude about an unknown component, it becomes your inference. This unknown component is logically proven by the given fact or by the given known component. Okay. So essentially, what we are saying is that the basic difference between a judgment and an inference is that an inference is something that does not change according to different perspectives, because you're logically proving an unknown component based on a known fact. Whereas judgments, they change with perspectives, they change with individuals. Okay. All right, I'll give you an example. Now let's talk about let's take your name, Sejal. Sejal attends college regularly. Now I'll draw two statements there. Statement number 1 is that Sejal attends college regularly. Okay. What do you think this is? Is this an inference or is this a fact? Now, second statement that I'm putting forth is that Sejal is an outstanding student because of her attendance, right? So here there are two sentences that I've constructed essentially. Number one, Sejal attends college regularly, and number two, Sejal is an outstanding student because of her attendance. Yeah. So statement number one, Sejal attends college regularly, is a verifiable fact, right? It is something that I'll call a verifiable fact, right? Whereas when you look at statement number two, in this case, it has a fact as well as as well as you know an inference, right? Because you're saying that the fact is that she is good with her attendance, right? It is a fact that I'm making use of, and then I am concluding that she is an outstanding student. Right now, outstanding student वाला जो component है, that is unknown, right? That is something that we are not sure of. But attendance is a known component. It is something that I can classify as a fact within the inference, right? So I'm making use of the known component to conclude about the unknown component. Okay. So there's that. And now coming back to the question at hand, Shruti said the answer is B or C. Okay. So let's go statement by statement, sentence by sentence. Yes. Sentence number 1 is, to date, Shiva has represented India thrice in luge, an extreme ice sport, at the Winter Olympics. So clearly, this is a fact. right? Because it is verifiable. We are quoting data as well. We have evidence that he has appeared thrice in luge, which is an ice sport in the Winter Olympics. Second statement, which is ranked 25th in world, Shiva, the youngest luge Olympian in the whole world, may well be called the fastest Indian on ice. So this Shruti, I would classify as an inference, right? Because we are saying that he is ranked 25th in the world. This is a fact. And using this, I am concluding about an unknown thing, which is that he is called the fastest Indian on ice, right? Youngest luge Olympian in the whole world may well be called the fastest Indian on ice. So I'm making use of this to logically conclude about this, right? So this becomes an inference there. No, no, this is an inference. This is not a judgment. This I will not classify as a judgment. I will classify this as an inference because this is not an opinion that will change with perspectives. Understand, Sejal, that judgment is an opinion. Either you agree with it or you disagree with it. Either the author agrees with it or the author disagrees with it, and it changes with everybody's opinion. It changes with everybody's perspective. When you shift the individual, then the perspective also shifts. But here, when I say that he is ranked 25th in the world, I am making use of this fact to conclude that he may well be called the fastest Indian on ice. So this I will classify as an inference, right? The third and the fourth statements. The thrill in the sport is how you keep your cool in extreme conditions. This is a judgment. This is an opinion. This is an opinion because some people may very well get scared from this, right? The author says the thrill helps you keep your cool. Sometimes the thrill gets everybody scared, right? You've been on a roller coaster ride as well. Some people get excited, some people. Okay, let's look at the last statement then. Yeah. So this becomes your judgment, and the last statement is considering that he never had a full time coach, his world ranking appears no less than a feat. See, uh, understand here, Shruti, I understand. मेरे को समझ आ रहा है कि you think this is, you would take this as a known component and this as the unknown component and conclude that because he did not have a full time coach, his world ranking appears no less than a feat, right? But this is again the author's diktat. This is what the author thinks, that because he did not have a full time coach, I think it should appear no less than a feat, right? But this is not a logical jump. This is not a logical conclusion. It's just what the author thinks, that because he did not have a full time coach, for me, it appears no less than a feat. Also, Shruti, sometimes this will happen in questions. You'll get confused. Ki yaar, I think this is an inference. I don't think this is a judgment. But what you have to do is, out of the options, you have to pick and choose ki char mein se at least there should be three that you agree with, right? And then you uh, make an intelligent guess there about the fourth one. So out of the four, we got fact, inference, and judgment. At least in the first three, only the fourth sentence was confusing us, right? But the first three are being satisfied by option B. So I would be like, okay, fine. You know what? The fourth one must also be a judgment then, and I go with option B there. All right. Let's look at the next question now. This is T. This is not S. To hit a ball, and this is T. B or C. All right. Sejal says E. Okay. So, at least the both of you got the first two sentences right. The first one, introducing organized sport programs for youngsters. Again, this should be yes. Sorry for the typos here. Is the only hope. Now, only tells me that this is the author's opinion, therefore, I will classify this as a judgment. The general public is beginning to recognize international standing of the Indian golf players who earn more money than the Indian cricketing icons. This is a verifiable fact, right? This is something that can be verified, so I would classify this as a fact. Now comes statement 3, right? In this day, in this age, when kids are electronically inclined and digitally divided. Now understand, Sejal, that this is something that is a known component within the sentence, right? Using this, I am concluding that the high-tech gizmos is also an attraction for kids to hit a ball and then check the digital readouts, right? So using this known component, I am logically reaching a conclusion about something else. So this I will classify as an inference. Okay, so there I think Shruti got this right. The answer is in fact B. And the last one, news of corporate investing in the games at the junior level is required not only in golf but also in all other sports. This is also the author's opinion. This is something that can shift with perspective. Some might basically claim that instead of corporate, it should be government expenditure. It should be government investing in games at junior level instead of corporates, right? So this becomes a judgment there. So the answer is in fact option B in that regard. Let's go to the next question. Option 2. Okay. Sejal says option 2 as well. Okay, cool. Just give me a moment. All right. Europe's economies are in doldrums and no one seems to know how to revive them. The author is concluding how no one seems to know this, but it is again an opinion of the author because we don't know this for a fact. We don't know whether this is true or not, so I would classify this as a judgment. Um, Two noisy arguments, now raging clearly, show that an alarming number of Europeans are in denial about the economic facts of life. We are using the idea of how there are these two noisy arguments, they are showing us something else. So I agree this becomes an inference there. A clear majority of voters and national governments are set on limiting these freedoms. The author is using these words set on. Right? This tells me that number one, there is no evidence to tell us whether there was a voting mechanism put in place जहाँ से अपने को figure out हुआ that there is a clear majority of voters. uh, but the author is claiming this without any evidence. Author is not telling us about when the elections happened, and the idea that they are set on limiting these freedoms again becomes your personal opinion. So this is a judgment. Freedom of movement of people is enshrined in the almost 50-year-old Treaty of Rome. Verifiable fact. So JIJF is the correct answer. Well done. Next question. Exactly, yes, Shruti. Also, when we say that Europe's economies are in doldrums, अगर वहाँ पे evidence होता, to tell me whether it is a recessionary phase or not, then I would have counted this a fact. Or if I had quoted somebody saying, the economist Amartya Sen is saying Europe's economies are in doldrums, then it becomes a fact. Otherwise, it stays a judgment only because it is an opinion at the end of the day. Okay, time and tide wait for no man. See, understand. Uh, Time and tide wait for no man is a quote, right? It is not really a fact. It is not something that I can verify. It's just something that old people keep on saying, right? So I will not really call this a fact at all. I would call this a judgment. Time and tide wait for no man is a judgment. It is not even an inference. It is not a fact. It is not an inference. It is a big judgment, right? It is an opinion. We don't know whether this is true or not. What if time and tide do wait for some men? Science has created more problems than it has solved. Okay, let me go to sentences 3 and 4 first, and then I'll come back to this. Familiarity breeds awareness. And if the breadwinner is a drug addict, imagine the sorry plight of the family. So, if the breadwinner is a drug addict becomes your known component, imagine the sorry plight of the family is your unknown component, right? So the last statement becomes your inference. So now we know that the first statement is a judgment and the last statement is an inference. The only two viable options are A and D, right? Now I have to figure out whether familiarity breeds awareness. Okay, fine, yes. This also, as Shruti saying, this is a clear inference as well. Now I'm left with option 2, right? Whether it is an inference or it is a fact. Science has created more problems than it has solved. इसके लिए see, my take uh, is that it is something that can be verified. So I will not really call this an inference because I'm not really making use of some other fact to conclude about this within the sentence. It is just an assertion that can be verified whether science has created more problems or not, right? So therefore I will classify this as fact and I will go with option A in that regard. इन्फेरेंस ये तब होती है अगर मैं कुछ कोट कर रहा होता, राइट? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई वुड हैव बीन सेइंग दैट यू नो व्हाट, seeing how plastic and nuclear fission and fusion experiments created quite a lot of or basically contributed a lot to the progress of humanity, but seeing how they are destroying the human world today, right? Our oceans are full of plastic. There's always a threat of nuclear war. So instead of creating solutions, it has science has created more problems. वहां पे मैं inference लेता, but this is not really making use of any evidence or a factual component to conclude, right? Therefore, I will take this on face value and I will call this a fact because then I can go back and verify whether this is true or not. Are you getting my point? ठीक है, तो उस हिसाब से the answer would be option A, JFII. I hope the explanation was satisfactory there. Let's go on to the next question. बेहतर जजमेंट रहता. मतलब the only reason why I would call this a fact more than a judgment is because it is verifiable. That is like the only differentiating factor. Otherwise, I'd have agreed with you, Shruti. Sejal, I will not call that an inference at all. Inference तो मैं बिल्कुल भी नहीं बोलूँगा that science has created more problems than it has solved, because as I told you that it needs that that factual component which is helping me conclude, right? Always make sure that your inferences have a known component and an unknown component. श्रुति का मैं फिर भी समझ सकता हूँ that we can call it a judgment, but only because I can verify it I will call this a fact. Okay, D. All right. I agree with the both of you. The answer is in fact D. We may suffer, but we should not inflict suffering. This is an opinion. Some people relish in psychopaths, sociopaths, relish in inflicting suffering. He was elected the president. This is a verifiable fact. Ultimately, man will develop into a Superman if this rate of progress is constant. यहाँ पे I will call this an inference, right? Because you are making use of this to logically reach this idea. Science is the answer to all world problems. Uh, Now there is difference, Sejal, there is difference between this statement and the previous statement which said science has created more problems than it has solved. Because that was a verifiable component. यहाँ पे when I say science is the answer to all world problems, some people will say no man, science is not the answer, money is the answer. Others will say nahi yaar, peace is the answer to all world problems. Some will say religion is the answer to all world problems. Some will say you know uh, sport is the answer to all world problems, right? So this is an opinion that will differ from person to person, and that is why I will classify this as a judgment as well, and the answer there becomes JFIJ or option D in that regard. Yeah, let's move on to the next question. Shruti says brotherhood. Why not sisterhood, Shruti? D, okay. Isha Sejal say D as well. All right. How? Okay. Malaria caused by unsanitary conditions killed 100 slum dwellers. Uh, more now, uh, I buy into the fact that because we have evidence here, you claim this to be a fact. But would an inference not suit this better? Because then we are giving a reasoning for it, a proper known component for it as well. The unknown component is that we are trying to find what killed 100 slum dwellers. वहाँ पे we are giving the reasoning that because it is caused by unsanitary conditions, we can conclude that malaria killed 100 slum dwellers. So more than an fact, I would classify this as an inference. The other components I kind of agree with that the second statement is a judgment, right? The third statement is also a judgment, and the fourth statement is again an inference. So the only sentence that I kind of differ on in terms of my opinion is sentence number one, which I would rather classify as an inference than a fact. Does that make sense to you guys? See, we have to view the sentence in its entirety, right? We have to view the sentence in its entirety, not just one component. Okay? So the answer there is IJJI or option B. Let's look at the next question. Okay. Sejal says C. Alright. Anisha says B. Okay. So, in the cellular industry, system capacity is a great issue. Now, understand that this is a verifiable claim. This is something that you can go and verify whether system capacity is a great issue or is not a great issue, right? That is why I would not really classify this as opinion. I would classify this as a fact because it is something that is easily verifiable. Yeah. No, no. It is something that is very easily verifiable, so I will classify this as a fact. Second, I agree as demand for cellular service grows, system operators try to find ways to increase system capacity. This is an inference. Uh, when I look at the third sentence, which is one of the easier ways currently adopted to increase capacity, is the conventional microcell approach. This is clearly again a verifiable thing, which is a fact. However, control of interference among cells is difficult in the microcell approach, verifiable fact. Prolonged delays in handoff sometimes occur when the microcell approach is adopted, again verifiable fact. The answer is in fact option E in that regard. Yep. हो जाएगा सेजल. It's only the first round of practice. The more you practice, the better you will get. See, okay. Says A, okay. Right. When I look at the very first statement, if necessity is the mother of invention, scarcity may be the mother of its cousin, innovation. It's a very subjective statement. It is the opinion of the author. I will call this a judgment. As long as staff produces goods on time, managers can stop watching over while they work. Right. I will classify this understand that I will classify this as a judgment because it is very judgmental to assume that there is only one component that basically contributes to this cause. Right, you're saying producing goods on time. It is not the only managerial concern, right? There are other managerial concerns as well, such as quality standards, threshold of the machinery that are being used, stuff like that. So there are a lot of managerial concerns. Only this will not stop managers or will convince the managers to stop watching over people while they work, right? uh, Third and the fourth statements, clearly they are inferences. It is an inference. an average global temperature rise of 4 would wipe out hundreds of species, bring extreme food and water shortage in vulnerable countries, and cause catastrophic floods. So you're using a known component, right? An average global temperature rise of 4 degrees Celsius, and then you're concluding about all the other, uh, you know, variables. You're using this as the logical backdrop for everything else. So there it becomes an inference. Fourth one as well, every deal is a new agreement between parties, and such alliances have the potential to become opportunities for permanent long term partnerships, right? So, this is basically being used to classify or to basically conclude about everything else. Yes. The answer is, in fact, option one. Yes, you were right earlier, Sejal. Next question. All right, Isha. So the definitions of inference, judgment, and fact. So the very first statement, it is a fact. The very first statement is a fact because you're quoting a report, right? So whenever you're quoting somebody, be it a report, be it another individual, right? Whenever you are basically furnishing direct quotes, there all the statements become your facts. Plus, when you have evidence, when you're quoting data, when you're quoting observations, everything becomes a fact in that regard. Plus, all universal truths, they are facts as well, right? So anything that can be, that is seen, heard, or read and is being quoted, it is a fact. Okay. Inference is when you're using a known component within a sentence, which is basically a fact, to conclude about an unknown component. Right? For example, before you joined in, I gave Sejal this example. Now there are two sentences here. Sentence number one is Sejal attends college regularly. Right? Now this is a verifiable claim. I can check whether she attends college regularly or not. So this is a fact. Whereas when I look at the second statement, which is that Sejal is an outstanding student because of her attendance. So here I am basically concluding that she's an outstanding student, which is an unknown component, based on her attendance, which is a known component. So I'm making use of a fact to conclude about something else. So there it becomes an inference. So whenever you use known facts to conclude about unknown claims, to conclude about unknown components in a logical manner, those become inferences. Yeah, and judgment is basically the opinion. Judgment is something that can shift with perspective. Judgment does not really tell you the why behind anything, right? The judgment shifts according to the individual. Judgment carries author's personal opinion. That is what it is. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे ग्लोबल वार्मिंग इज वेरी लाइकली टू हैव बीन caused by human activity. The leading international body studying climate change said in a report. We are quoting a report, so this is a fact. Yeah, I can check whether the report said this or not, right? So this becomes a fact there. Second one, the IPCC report steers clear of policy recommendations, instead providing rigorously. So now I'm making use of a known component that it steers clear of policy recommendations to logically reach a conclusion, instead providing rigorously scientific assessment of the likely risks. Right? So I'm making use of a known component to reach a logical end to an unknown component. So this becomes an inference in that regard. The third one, the likelihood that the phenomenon has been created by the burning of fossil fuels and other actions is greater than 90%. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change concluded in its fourth report becomes a fact, right? Global warming is an unequivocal fact and is likely to continue for centuries. No evidence to back this up, so this becomes your judgment in that regard. Okay. So with this, we come to the end of today's class, guys. I'll wrap this up because 11 o'clock, I am taking a special class on para jumbles. Don't know when I am, see, when I'm quoting a report, when I'm quoting a report, right, then it is a direct quote, right? This idea that global warming is very likely to have been caused by human activity, the leading international body said in a report. So I'm not concluding whether it is very likely to have been caused or not. What I'm concluding is whether the report said this or not, right? So this is what I'm counting as a fact. Yeah. And similarly, when I talk about so Sejal, all of these statements have to be independent statements. If you were talking about whether the last one could be an inference or not, the last one cannot be an inference because it is an independent statement. I'm not really using other statements to back this up in a claim, right? Every statement is an individual statement, so you have to judge them separately. ठीक है. Isha, we'll do more questions tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Right now, in 2 minutes, I have to take a special class on para jumbles. So if you guys want to study para jumbles, you can log on to the Unacademy platform and take that class from me right now. Right? So yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 10 o'clock or in 2 minutes on the Unacademy platform. See you.